For those who are celebrating over the weekend, I hope you had a good holiday. Today we're going to talk about whether we should take glutathione specifically to increase red blood cell magnesium if red blood cell magnesium is low, and particularly in the case where ideally you measure also serum magnesium and find that it's specifically red blood cell magnesium that's low, rather than both serum and red blood cells, since that would more clearly indicate that you have a problem transporting magnesium into the cell rather than just assuming that's the case on the red blood cell magnesium being low, because red blood cell magnesium could just be low because you're deficient in magnesium, period. And so this is a follow-up to the last video I did. And I'm going to share my screen. So this is from Mommy Chula this is from Instagram. And I had this video, do we need glutathione to retain magnesium? That's the last one I did before the holiday weekend. And Mommy Chula, who had originally asked this question, and look at that video if you want my analysis of the study she had posted, but it was a study suggesting that glutathione status is needed to retain magnesium. The basic conclusion from that study that I outlined in that video is that what you really need is insulin to transport magnesium into red blood cells and into cells, generally speaking. But because antioxidant status is important to insulin sensitivity, then if you boost glutathione status with vitamin E in that particular study, then you enhance the transport of magnesium into red blood cells, because you have, through getting better antioxidant status, you have enhanced your sensitivity to insulin. And since insulin brings magnesium into cells, then you've enhanced your ability to get the magnesium into the cells. So, so she had, well, here's her response. Thank you for taking the time to break down the study. But she also said, I understand your point in regards to the study. Thank you for taking the time to address it. And do you think that supplementing with NAC may be useful in cases where magnesium retention is an issue? And actually, I'm realizing now I made the title of this, should we take glutathione? But the actual question was, should we take NAC? But it really boils down to the exact same question, because the reason you would take NAC, which is N-acetylcysteine, is because that's one way to boost glutathione status. But note that the study we were talking about was boosting glutathione status by taking vitamin E. So one question would be, well, why would you take NAC versus vitamin E versus glutathione versus vitamin C versus you name your antioxidant? Why wouldn't you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables or what have you? And so that's basically the gist of my answer. I actually answered her on Instagram, but I'm going to break it down a little bit more in this video. So what I had said was, from the study and what I said in the video, I don't see this as specific to glutathione. Rather, it's about insulin sensitivity. That can be an antioxidant issue, but the antioxidant system is complex. I have lots of resources on antioxidants and glutathione, but the gold standard approach, in my opinion, is to do testing and focus on what I outlined in the antioxidant section of Testing Nutritional Status, the Ultimate Cheat Sheet. And so I want to break that down in more detail here. And if you're on the live chat, I'll field any questions on antioxidants in the live chat for today. And I'll answer the ones that I can easily answer off the top of my head. Okay, so to break this down a little bit, I want to start by backing up here to my general approach outlined in Testing Nutritional Status, the Ultimate Cheat Sheet, which you can get. It's not free. You can get it at chrismasterjohnphd.com/cheat sheet. It was just recently updated and released as version 1.3. I think the publication date's probably on the sales page, but it was about a month or two ago. Okay, so first of all, a lot of people use red blood cell magnesium on its own to assess magnesium status, which I think is an incredibly bad idea for the reasons I'm about to describe right now. Okay, so we're going to click to the magnesium section, and that the testing that I would do, and the testing that's outlined here. So there's in the cheat sheet has a comprehensive screening section, comprehensive screening approach, which most people usually who use this don't actually do the comprehensive screening. Most people use the cost saving approach, which helps you isolate the actual testing you need, because if you did the comprehensive approach, undoubtedly a portion of it, if not a lot of it, wouldn't be covered by insurance. And so unless you got no time and lots of money to burn, it doesn't make sense to do the comprehensive screening proactively. It makes more sense to do the cost saving approach outlined in the cheat sheet, which the cheat sheet walks you through that. I'm not going to go into it here. But anyway, serum magnesium and red blood cell magnesium are the two essential ones. And I would say a 24-hour urine magnesium would be a backup test for if you were trying, if you couldn't make any sense of the first two tests given your diet and supplement regime, then 24-hour urine magnesium would be the backup to do that. And the basic logic here is that some people use red blood cell magnesium on its own because, well, there's some data that suggests that red blood cell magnesium is a more sensitive indicator than serum magnesium to magnesium deficiency, but I'm not sure that that's actually true. I think what it is oftentimes someone can have normal serum magnesium and low red blood cell magnesium, and one interpretation of that is, oh, red blood cell magnesium's picking up deficiency cases that serum's not. But that's probably the wrong interpretation. The right interpretation is probably that that subset of people have a problem getting the magnesium into their cells in general, and their red blood cells are an index of that. So I always suggest testing serum and red blood cell together and never apart from one another. I think it's a terrible policy to ever test one of these and not the other. And a worst case scenario example of what can happen when you just test one of these. Well, first of all, I mean, we just went through one case. Serum magnesium might totally miss out on the fact that red blood cell is low. And in that case, you got false normal results. But I've seen people who only test red blood cell magnesium over and over and over again, and they assume that because their red blood cell magnesium is low, that that they need to supplement with more magnesium. And so they get up to 2,000 milligrams of magnesium, which is a preposterously high dose that almost no one should ever need. And they still can't get their red blood cell magnesium up. And they're like, what the heck? Meanwhile, they're like, why is my heart rate dropping to chronically low levels? And why do I feel worse? And the answer is that this person, because they weren't measuring serum magnesium, probably had their serum, and because their magnesium can't get into the cells, taking more magnesium does nothing to get the magnesium into the red blood cells, but it does increase the serum magnesium through the roof. So they keep increasing the dose, and they're never measuring serum magnesium, and the serum magnesium presumably is going up, 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 up. And then by the time it gets to 2 times the top of the reference range, you have hypermagnesemia, and it's suppressing your heart rate, as would be completely obviously not obvious, but knowing, being educated about the consequences of hypermagnesemia would predictably suppress your heart rate. And so I think that's disastrous, because hypermagnesemia is harmful regardless of your red blood cell magnesium status. Similarly, hypomagnesemia, low serum magnesium, is harmful in and of itself, regardless of red blood cell status, because on the one hand, you need magnesium inside your cells. On the other hand, you need magnesium in the serum. And so the consequences of being high or low in one or the other are different, but they're still both a problem. Now, the way that I look at this is, if your serum magnesium is normal and your red blood cell magnesium is low, or if they're both in the normal range, but serum's at the top of the range and red blood cells at the bottom of the range, in other words, their relationship to the middle of the range is opposite, then I think that indicates a problem getting magnesium into the cells. And, by contrast, if they're both low, or they're both on the low end of the range, or they're both high, or they're both on the high end of the range, then the most reasonable interpretation is that your cellular transport of magnesium is normal, but your magnesium status is off. Either it's too high or it's too low. So it's when these two diverge that you have a potential problem with cellular transport. Now, if your diet or supplements indicate that you should have high magnesium status and you have low magnesium status, then you might have a problem with dietary absorption, but you might be peeing it all out. And that's the utility of the 24-hour urine magnesium. So, if your diet and supplements are if you're on the fence as to whether your diet and supplemental magnesium together should give you the magnesium status that you have, then the question becomes, is it that your magnesium is veering on the too high side or the too low side? Well, if it's too high, then probably you can just cut out the supplements, or and when I say too high, I mean serum and red blood cell are telling you the same thing. If they're both telling you that it's too high, you probably have more than you need. But if they're both telling you that it's too low, then there's two possibilities. One is that you have an absorption problem, and the other is that you're peeing it out. And the only ways to assess that are to look at the magnesium in your feces or to look at the magnesium in your urine. Because if you have an absorption problem, your fecal magnesium is going to be high. And if you have a retention problem, your urine magnesium is going to be high. And I think it's easier to get a 24-hour urine magnesium than it is to get a fecal magnesium test. And therefore, I think the easiest way to differentiate between those two is to run the 24-hour magnesium. And so if you're peeing out your magnesium, that's a different topic than what we're talking about today, with the exception that because today what we're talking about is a problem getting magnesium into cells. So if you couldn't get magnesium into cells and your serum magnesium was normal, you probably will be peeing out more magnesium, because to keep your serum magnesium normal, you're probably getting rid of the excess, because you're going to pee out magnesium in proportion to how much you're peeing in general, but also in proportion to your serum magnesium, because magnesium doesn't hop from a red blood cell, it doesn't teleport into the urine. The serum passes through the kidneys and things get filtered and things get passed through. And so from the serum, that's what's going to be driving magnesium into your urine. But so I'll just leave it at that. If your diet and supplements are saying your magnesium status should be good, and your serum and red blood cell magnesium are both telling you it's low, and your urine magnesium is high, then you are clearly peeing out your magnesium. And so your algorithm goes to figure out the solutions to that. That specific case is not relevant to what we're talking today. Today, we're talking about when serum and red blood cell magnesium diverge such that the red blood cell magnesium is low and the serum magnesium is not. And so Mami Chula's question was, should we just take NAC to fix that? Based on the study that showed that vitamin E supplementation could boost glutathione status, enhance the sensitivity to insulin, and reap the benefits of insulin in transferring magnesium into the cell. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a second. So, my answer to that is basically like, why would it be NAC versus glutathione versus vitamin E versus vitamin C versus zinc versus copper versus selenium versus, on and on the list, all these things that are relevant to antioxidant status? And the answer to that is your antioxidant function is going to be only as good as the weakest link in the chain. And so, yeah, I'm sure if your antioxidant status is bad and you supplement with some non-specific antioxidant that is totally random, you'll probably get some benefit from it. And that's exactly what they showed in the context of the vitamin E supplement. But that doesn't mean it's the best approach, because if your antioxidant status is poor because you're deficient in copper, then why would your solution be to supplement with NAC? It just doesn't make any sense. So the approach should be tailored to the specific issue that you have. Now, to back up for a second, in terms of enhancing magnesium transport into cells, I really think about three things. One is salt, one is insulin, and one is vitamin B6. And I'm not sure why vitamin B6 enhances the transport of magnesium into cells. I just had the sudden desire to think of whether I could think of a solution off the top of my head. I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know why B6 enhances magnesium transport into cells, but there's a study indicating that vitamin B6 supplementation does improve magnesium transport into cells. So it does for reasons that I don't know. But and then on the case of insulin and salt, it's just, if you go into a good nutrition textbook in the magnesium chapter, they're going to show how the transport is dependent on insulin and salt. So you might need more salt, and go see I don't know what that was, like a 2-hour live video I did on how much salt and potassium we need last week. So check that out in my recent video feed if you want my thoughts on salt. But today what I want to do is just break down the antioxidant piece of the puzzle a little bit more. So I'm going to share my screen again. And remember, I'll field any questions on antioxidants, especially stuff that's highly relevant to the content I'm going over here in the live chat. And I'll get to that. I'll get to the live chat when I finish this explanation. So in the cheat sheet, again, you can get this at chrismasterjohnphd.com/cheat sheet. There's actually an entire section on antioxidant vitamins and minerals that includes general testing for oxidative stress, vitamin E, vitamin C, manganese, zinc, copper, selenium, iron, and glutathione. And these are, so the gold standard approach, in my opinion, no one else on earth would say this is the gold standard approach. It's just what in my own mind, in my view, this is the best way to do it, is to figure out exactly what's the limiting factor for your protection against oxidative stress. But the first thing you might want to know is, do you have a problem with oxidative stress? Because you may not. Now, there are certain situations where you could infer that you probably do without testing. So as we were talking about in the iron, the video I did last week, why does iron overload cause diabetes? If you have diabetes, you probably have oxidative stress, period. If you have iron overload, you probably have oxidative stress, period. If you have obesity, I'm not going to say you definitely have oxidative stress, but you do probably have oxidative stress, because if you're obese by your BMI or by your body fat percentage, you might be metabolically healthy, but statistically, chances are that you've crossed your personal fat threshold, meaning the threshold at which body fat accumulation starts to elicit inflammation and oxidative stress. So you probably have oxidative stress. If you're a smoker, you probably have oxidative stress. If you have heavy metal toxicity, you probably have oxidative stress. So there's various conditions where you could reasonably just straight up infer that you probably have oxidative stress going on. And you could probably skip over the general testing for oxidative stress if you really were trying to minimize the testing. But of course, there was some question on YouTube that I'm not going to specifically answer, but or maybe it was Instagram, I don't remember. Someone said, how is it possible in the modern world to never have oxidative stress? When I say have oxidative stress, I mean have an elevated amount of oxidative stress that is disrupting your insulin sensitivity in a way that it's limiting for magnesium transport into cells. So no one ever in any, in the ancient prehistoric world or ancient history or, relatively recent history or ever now or ever in the future, no one will have zero oxidative stress. That's not even worth considering. So everyone has baseline levels of reactive oxygen species production that are eliciting feedback responses always. The question is, are you outside of normal parameters in a way that it's going to disrupt your normal metabolism and cause harm, such as by interfering with insulin sensitivity to the point where your magnesium isn't effectively getting into your cells? That's what I mean by have oxidative stress. So in the general testing of oxidative stress, the general recommendations that I have are lipid peroxides, 8-hydroxy, 2-deoxyguanosine, and there's and if you're getting an organic acid test that has citric acid metabolites, you could make inferences about oxidative stress in the ways that are limited here, that are outlined here. But if you're not otherwise getting that for some other specific purpose, by the way, organic acids are included in the comprehensive screening here. But I mean, if you don't have that test, I wouldn't go get an organic acids test just to see if you have oxidative stress going on. But I think Quest and LabCorp both offer lipid peroxides. I know one of them does. 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine is, I'm not sure if anyone offers it individually, but it's on a lot of panels. Although not mentioned here, F2 isoprostanes are another general marker of oxidative stress that you could look at. Technically, these citric acid metabolites are examples of oxidative stress because it's an altering of metabolism in response to reactive oxygen species. And technically, insulin resistance in response to reactive oxygen species would be an example of oxidative stress, whereas lipid peroxides and 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine are examples of oxidative damage. So damage is damage to macromolecules such as lipids in the case of lipid peroxides or DNA in the case of 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. Stress is the eliciting of a compensatory response to your metabolism in a way that alters it from what would be the healthiest way of metabolizing things. And so it's on a theoretical basis, we should make that distinction, but on a practical basis, if you have lipid peroxides or 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine is high and you have oxidative damage, you must have oxidative stress because if you didn't, basically oxidative damage is a worse situation than oxidative stress. It means that you were not able to compensate for the stress enough to protect your macromolecules. Therefore, your lipids and your DNA are getting damaged. Anyway, just to go through this, I'm not going to go through all the testing, but here's why you would want to break it down in this way. So if you have oxidative damage or oxidative stress, it could be from vitamin E deficiency. Specifically, vitamin E is necessary to protect against lipid peroxides. But if you have, actually, this is an interesting point that's a little subtle. So in the previous study that I looked at last time, they showed that vitamin E supplementation helped normalize glutathione status. But vitamin E's only known role is, and I know there's a lot of indirect effects of vitamin E, but vitamin E's only known direct role is to protect against lipid peroxidation chain reactions in the cell membrane. And so why would it improve glutathione status? Well, if you have lipid peroxides forming the cell membrane, they can break down into harmful products like malondialdehyde that can then go slip out of the membrane and directly damage your DNA, create damage to other macromolecules in the cell. And one analogy I've used in the past, or metaphor rather, is breaking glass. If you break glass, you now have shards of broken glass and you can step on them and, tear your feet apart, for example. And so you want to protect the fatty acids in the cell membrane, not just because you don't want your glass broken, but also because you don't want to tear your feet to shreds by walking on the shards. So if vitamin E doesn't fully protect against the lipid peroxidation in the cell membrane, what happens is glutathione will come in. Glutathione peroxidase will oxidize glutathione in order to reduce lipid peroxides to hydroxy fatty acids, because that stabilizes them. And although hydroxy fatty acids can do harmful things, such as elicit gene expression changes that can play roles in disease processes, they don't break down into shards of broken glass that can then cause serious damage directly to other molecules in the cell. And so when vitamin E is missing, glutathione, with the help of selenium and glutathione peroxidase, have to serve as a backup to reduce lipid peroxides in the cell membrane to hydroxy fatty acids. So that would be why vitamin E would spare glutathione status in that case. But you want to test your vitamin E status if you want to know whether vitamin E is your limiting factor to improving your antioxidant status. Similarly, vitamin C's main role in the antioxidant system is to recycle vitamin E. And so you want to look at your vitamin C status to know if that's the missing link. In the case of manganese, manganese is a cofactor for the mitochondrial form of superoxide dismutase. And so therefore, it's going to be critically important to protecting mitochondria from oxidative stress by converting superoxide to hydrogen peroxide, which then can be converted into water. And then zinc and copper are responsible for superoxide dismutase in the cytosol, which is out basically the rest of the cell outside of the mitochondria, and then also in the extracellular space. So superoxide dismutase, when it's secreted into the blood, is going to depend on zinc and copper. And notably, as I've talked about in the past, because this enzyme relies on zinc and copper together and not interchangeably, one of the most harmful effects of too much zinc is that you can create a copper deficiency, and you can actually superoxide dismutase activity will decline when you over supplement with zinc because you create a copper deficiency. And if the zinc is part of the enzyme and the copper is not there, no dice. And then copper's next for the reason I just described. And then selenium, of course, is here because selenium is a cofactor for glutathione peroxidase. Now, think about that study we looked at last time. Vitamin E helped spare glutathione from oxidation because it was presumably because it was reducing, it was minimizing lipid peroxide formation in the cell membrane, and thus reducing the demand to oxidize glutathione to protect against the to convert lipid peroxides to hydroxy fatty acids. But glutathione's ability to do that would be completely dependent on selenium, because selenium is a cofactor for glutathione peroxidase. And so if the selenium's not there, then you're not going to be able to convert lipid peroxides to hydroxy fatty acids. The lipid peroxides are more likely to engage in a lipid peroxidation chain reaction if they're not taken out of that cycle by converting to hydroxy fatty acids, and they're also more likely to create those broken shards of glass like MDA that can then damage other molecules in the cell. So think about that. What would that study have found if the people were deficient in selenium? Well, who knows whether those people were deficient in selenium, but presumably the situation would have been a lot worse because glutathione would not have been an effective compensation for the lack of vitamin E in that case. And so and in particular, I think selenium is extremely important to test because I think your chances are 50-50 of having too much or too little. Or maybe it's more like 30-30, 33-33-33 in terms of too little, too much, or right in the middle. And so why would you want to be supplementing NAC if your main problem is that you're selenium deficient? At the same time, why would you want to be taking selenium if you have too much? And in one case, one of my consulting clients, before they were a consulting client of mine, had did serious damage by taking an NAC supplement that had selenium in it. And so he needed to boost his glutathione status a lot. But because the NAC supplement had selenium in it, the sheer quantity of NAC he was taking was leading him to be taking grams of selenium a day, and his selenium became extremely elevated. And that fact then became a terrible aggravator of the oxidative stress for that particular person, because elevated selenium will cause oxidative stress, because when selenium is present in beyond the capacity for proteins to use it, just as is the case with copper and iron, selenium will become the cause of oxidative stress. And then, of course, iron, we talked in great detail about iron last week, but iron, in proportion to its your ability to use iron as a cofactor, you need iron for the antioxidant system and the enzyme catalase, which converts hydrogen peroxide to water. Oh, and by the way, selenium and glutathione are also another mechanism to convert hydrogen peroxide to water, in addition to what they do in the cell membrane. But too much iron running around free will become the cause of oxidative stress, like we talked about before. And then in terms of glutathione, there's a number of things to think about for glutathione status. And among them, you need to think about the fact that glutathione is made from protein. And so if you don't have enough protein, you will not have enough glutathione. And yes, you can take NAC because often cysteine is the limiting factor for glutathione status. But if you're taking NAC and you're not addressing total protein and your non-collagen protein to collagen/glycine balance, then taking NAC might give you the cysteine that you need to make glutathione, but then all of a sudden glycine becomes the limiting factor. And so there is a study out there showing that NAC and glycine is particularly effective at raising glutathione status, which makes sense because it's providing both the limiting amino acids. Glutamate can be a limiting amino acid if you're in a catabolic protein wasting state, but it's rarely going to be the limiting factor because generally, if you're eating enough protein to get cysteine or glycine for glutathione synthesis, you're generally getting way more glutamate than you need because glutamate is the most common amino acid in the diet. So protein composition and total protein amount are a key factor in having enough glutathione. But then you also need magnesium and ATP and insulin to make glutathione. And so if you don't have enough, now look at the vicious cycle you could have here, right? Because this whole point of this is that you might not be able to get magnesium into the cell if you have oxidative stress, and boosting your glutathione status might help. Well, if the reason your glutathione status is limited is because you're magnesium deficient, then you're going to have a vicious cycle where you're going to need more magnesium, but you're also going to have to do things to enhance magnesium transport. And that is going to mean, supporting antioxidant status in a context around glutathione so that you can get the magnesium in that you need to synthesize the glutathione. So you do have possibilities for vicious cycles here. But ATP is another one. And so, if you have diabetes or hypothyroidism or adrenal insufficiency or some kind of inborn error of metabolism, or you're deficient in B vitamins or iron or sulfur or copper needed for producing ATP, and of course magnesium is needed as a complex with ATP and to produce ATP, any of those things could make ATP a limiting factor. And so that if it is, that can open up a whole nother can of worms. But then also, and so the insulin is providing the signal to boost glutathione status. And so if you're, we talked about the role of oxidative stress in insulin resistance, but you can also be insulin resistant just because you're crossing your personal fat threshold, and the fat accumulation and energy overload itself becomes an independent contributor to insulin resistance. And so if that's the case, that needs to be addressed. But you can be insulin sensitive and just not have any insulin. And so inadequate carbohydrate and thus inadequate insulin stimulation can be a reason for limited glutathione status. And I know there's an argument out there based on animal studies that were looking at the hippocampus, where the keto people cite this study all the time and say that it enhanced glutathione status in the hippocampus, but actually whole body glutathione status was, and especially in the liver, was low through that study and through the entire time frame of the study. And so you can expect local benefits of a keto diet maybe, but if your glutathione status is low and you're on a very carbohydrate restricted diet, you should consider carbohydrate as one of the things that might be able to boost your glutathione status. And that's, very clearly demonstrated in one study where they used a euglycemic hyperinsulinemic clamp to completely fix the glutathione status problem in diabetes. And so, shoving glucose and insulin into a person's cells is improving glutathione status, then that just demonstrates that carbohydrate and the insulin that it generates can be an important way of boosting glutathione status. And then finally, there's the effects of NRF2 stimulation to boost glutathione status. So NRF2 stimulation is basically the gene expression pathway of dietary antioxidants. Particularly polyphenolic compounds are generally acting by enhancing NRF2 signaling. And so, a diet rich in fruits and vegetables is probably going to be the default whole foods way to approach that. And then there's supplements like sulforaphane or milk thistle or various others that are marketed as antioxidants that are primarily composed of polyphenolic constituents. And in those cases, those are generally all examples of NRF2 stimulators. So, and then there's, and this glutathione section, the cheat sheet basically goes through all those things that I just talked about. And then it also goes into things that you can do that might be lying in the background, especially B vitamins involved in energy metabolism and so on. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And that's basically it. So I'm going to go to the live chat now. But basically, the summary answer to that is your approach, if you're trying to boost antioxidant status in order to enhance insulin sensitivity, in order to get magnesium into cells, should be based on trying to understand what is the limiting factor in you as an individual for your glutathione status or for your antioxidant status and addressing that specific thing. So I'm going to go to the live chat and see if there's any questions that I can answer on antioxidant status. Pan says, could almonds give you enough magnesium? Well, I don't know that you would want to get your magnesium all from almonds. So let's look that up for a second. So raw almonds. Let's take almonds dry roasted with salt added. The salt's not going to affect the magnesium content, but these don't have oils added to them, so they're pure almonds. It's taking a minute to load for reasons I don't know. Hopefully my internet connection isn't limiting for my live stream. Okay, I'll go back to that when that loads. Lori Taylor says, I have difficulty getting docs to order serum magnesium, much less red blood cell magnesium. Well, you either get a new doctor or you do direct-to-consumer testing, like with directlabs.com. If you live in certain states like New York or New Jersey, I think Rhode Island is the other one, then you got to cross state borders and stop at a Quest. But, if you're willing to pay out of pocket for it, it's incredibly easy to get direct. Well, I mean, I live in New York City, right? So it's not incredibly easy to drive to Connecticut or take the Metro North to Connecticut, but it's entirely doable. So it's your choice to find a doctor that works with you in the way that you want, or to use direct to consumer and get around the various legal loopholes that are put in place by certain state enforcement agencies. But, that's a choice you have to make. Okay, so going back to almonds. All right, so a cup of whole almonds, dry roasted with salt, has 824 calories and has basically your daily value of magnesium. So I just had a video that came out today on, whether is there consequences to excess nuts and seeds. I think eating a cup of almonds every day is probably a bit excess in terms of anti-nutrients. And let's see, the PUFA content is 17.5 whopping grams of PUFA. So, I mean, I think that's excessive to try to meet your just from an anti-nutrient and PUFA perspective. But it's also 824 calories. So you have to consider whether that's the most calorie efficient way to get it into your diet, because you're not talking about an insignificant allocation of your calories. Lori Taylor says stomach acid is a big factor. Yeah, I mean, if you have just malabsorption, there's various digestive problems you can have that will lead to malabsorption. There's also specific magnesium transporter defects. But that we're sort of not talking about that today, right? Because the question is about the part of the algorithm that tells you serum is normal and red blood cells low. You don't get serum is normal and red blood cells low if your problem is dietary, you can't absorb it from your intestines. So whether it's because your stomach acid is low, or you have SIBO, or you have intestinal inflammation, or you have intestinal damage, or you have a specific magnesium transporter, regardless, that's going to produce low serum and low red blood cell magnesium, and that should not tell you that you need to work on magnesium transport into your cells. That should tell you the opposite of that, which is that you need to work on your gut health to improve your magnesium absorption. Of course, as I said at the beginning, you would essentially conclude that either because you knew you had the gut problem, or because, as I didn't say that at the beginning, or because, as I said at the beginning, your magnesium intake is good, but your serum and red blood cell are running low, and you ran a urinary magnesium test that showed that the urine was either normal or itself was low. So if serum, red blood cell, and urine are low, and magnesium intake is normal or superb, then you have a gut malabsorption problem. Wellness Path for Me says glutathione peroxidase is ceruloplasmin-bound copper dependent, as are all oxidative enzymes. Prove it. Show me the study that shows that glutathione peroxidase is structurally bound to ceruloplasmin and to copper, and that every redox enzyme is also bound to them. Yeah. Post Wellness Path for Me, post a reference. I'll take a look at it. What's the best antioxidants to heal from Cipro, mate? KK says. KK, I have a video about my ideas, which are all hypothesis brainstorming driven, about how to heal from Cipro, coming out in a few weeks. So wait to check out for that. Wellness Path for Me says magnesium ATP production produces oxidative stress. It is the exhaust of the process. Bio-copper activated enzymes manage it below normal levels. Prove it. Show me the study and I'll take a look. Wellness Path for Me, bio-copper, magnesium, retinol, and sun exposure. Search Morley Robbins. Find the study that Morley Robbins is citing to show that these things are true, and post the study, and then I'll check it out. Wellness Path for Me says ATP is always and forever magnesium ATP. ATP alone is worthless. I agree. Thanks for explaining this. You're welcome. ADP into complex 5 depends on ceruloplasmin-bound copper activating cytochrome C oxidase. I mean, if you're saying that you need ceruloplasmin in order to get copper into cells, and you need copper in cytochrome C oxidase, sure. I mean, that's basic textbook biochemistry, is that numerous complexes in the electron transport chain have copper redox centers. That's not controversial at all. But, if by implication you're saying that every problem with every redox enzyme is all about ceruloplasmin, that's ridiculous. Chuck Becker says you're giving us precious, esoteric, hard to discover ways to vastly benefit health. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. So thank you. Joseph Bates says, mind blown emoji. Me too. MD says, whoa. Yeah, me too. Wellness Path for Me says, is it true that taking magnesium with fat hurts its bioavailability? If so, how much does it affect it? Dr. Carolyn Dean says supplementing magnesium with fat oil is a waste. That sounds like an exaggeration. So if you have fat malabsorption, you will risk a deficiency of all the positively charged minerals because they can be saponified by the fatty acids that don't get absorbed. But to go from that to if you take magnesium with fat, it's worthless is a preposterous overstatement of the kernel of truth that lies at the center of that. Chuck Becker says, why not take all the magnesium supplements at bedtime to maximize the benefits for deeper sleep? Well, because you shouldn't need to take magnesiums at bedtime to get sleep if your magnesium status is good and your metabolism is normal. But if you find that magnesium helps you sleep, you should take magnesium to help you sleep. Just as a reminder, I'm only fielding questions on the antioxidant content that I was presenting here in the live chat. Jatube Lizard says, can B6 being 300% of max of reference range from getting it with magnesium supplements be a problem, i.e. can it be neurotoxic? Is it better to switch to products that don't contain B6? Well, first of all, look at whether your B6 that you measured was in plasma, in which case it's probably high because you were taking B6 recently and it's on its way to somewhere and the measurement means nothing. So I would, first of all, if you're testing plasma B6, let's see if I can quickly find half-life of plasma B6. Interesting. Body stores pops up on Google as 25 to 33 days. That's interesting to know. If that were true, then your B6 would be depleted to 0 in about 165 days. You would, if you were on a 0 B6 diet, you would have no B6 in your body, and you'd probably die before that. But that's interesting. That's not what we're looking for. Okay, pharmacokinetics of B6 supplements in humans. This looks like what we want. Let me see if I can find the half-life quickly. They have half-life. AUC. Clearance time. Half. That's half-life of absorption. All right, so they conclude that there's a I don't want the half-life of absorption. I want the, let's see. Okay. I don't want to do the math involved there. Let's see if this one has it. All right, so I'm just looking to see if I can find half-life of B6 real easily in the plasma. All right, let me switch this to PubMed, see if that helps. Plasma B6 half-life. All right, this study looks like it has it. You know what? I think this is going to take too long for me to work out, but I would say you want to stop if you're taking B6 supplements. You want to stop for probably um, probably want to stop for 4 days or maybe a week before you measure your B6, your plasma B6 level before concluding anything. Because if you took the supplement like the night before and you went into get a fasting blood measurement and it was 3 times the top of the reference range, that wouldn't be surprising at all. Then the other thing is you should probably, if it doesn't make sense based on your supplements, you should probably get your alkaline phosphatase measured, because you have low alkaline phosphatase that could be contributing to poor clearance of pyridoxal phosphate from your blood, and that could be kind of giving you a false elevation of it. But there are rare cases, and I know there's a Facebook group of people dedicated to this. There are rare cases where lower doses of B6 will cause neurotoxicity, but in general, what's well documented is that you need 500 milligrams or more of pyridoxine to result in peripheral neuropathy, and that it goes away when you take the B6 out. So I do think there's very rare cases where people have some kind of bad neurological reaction to low dose of B6. I think it's exceedingly rare, and I think it's indicating other problems that need to be looked at. But I wouldn't take your blood level being 3 times the top of the reference range to be necessarily an indicator of that. I would be looking more at your supplemental dose. Because at the end of the day, it's probably going to be dependent on, I think high plasma level could fool you if it's not being cleared from plasma effectively, and that might not be leading to neurological accumulation of the B6 at all. It's that sort of like looking at serum magnesium and never measuring red blood cell magnesium, I guess. A wellness path for me says, you explained it the way I meant it. Ceruloplasmin bound copper is required to transport bioavailable copper to do its thing, and that way it's dependent on, yeah, well, sure, I mean, but the way so I think we're in agreement, but the way that you phrased it was, I mean, first of all, if you say all enzymes are dependent on ceruloplasmin bound copper, from a biochemistry perspective, what you're saying is that it's structurally bound to ceruloplasmin bound to copper, which is definitely not true. And so you shouldn't say it that way if you want anyone versed in biochemistry to not give you a funny look. Because everything is sort of interdependent in the body. I mean, we talk about glutathione peroxidase being selenium dependent because selenium is structurally a cofactor of the enzyme. Or, it doesn't have to be structurally bound to it, but it has to at least utilize it in the reaction that it's catalyzing. You wouldn't say like, I don't know. You wouldn't say like all redox enzymes are calorie dependent or something like that. But you do, if you're not eating enough calories, you're not making enough ATP, you're not going to do any of that stuff. But also, I think it's important to recognize that it's not like everyone's copper deficient. And so, yeah, if you're copper deficient, then you can have a cascade of problems from limiting certain factors that are required for others. But that doesn't imply that everyone who has a redox enzyme problem is copper deficient. So it's just, and that's, in fact, that's exactly why I went over copper here to point that out. And you did bring up other things that I didn't mention in that, yes, copper is also required for ATP production due to its role in the electron transport chain. Actually, I did mention that. I just mentioned it in passing while I was saying many things. But it's just one variable. It's not like the root cause of all problems is copper deficiency. If your diet and everything is great and you are profoundly copper deficient, then copper deficiency will be the root cause of everything that's wrong with you. But that's not that shouldn't be taken as the standard typical case. Okay. That's it for today. Hope to see you tomorrow. Take care, guys.